Greetings, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Dreamscapes. Today we have our friend Mike Oppenheimer he's a writer, a podcaster, and a book indexer. We're going to get to that in a moment. I'm going to have him describe what that is. First, housekeeping. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. I always need more volunteers to share their dreams. You can support my work, get a t-shirt, coffee mug, tote bag, sticker, whatever at spring.com. Also direct donation links. And I have now currently 10 available published works of historical dream literature available on Amazon. Links in the description, do all that good stuff. That is enough housekeeping. Put that away. So we've got our friend, and your website is MikeyOpp, MikeyOpp.com. And we were talking a bit before, and you said you do fiction novels and nonfiction work, but the thing I found most fascinating was the book indexing. If you would tell the audience what that is.
Sure, yeah. So after a career in restaurant work and followed by a career in teaching and administration, I moved to Arizona, and I was not looking to find a job in education here because of many reasons. And so a mutual family friend, recommended, based on my editing skills and whatnot that I had in degrees, that I check in this company, a book indexing company. And so I applied, and it was actually a grueling process, and I got hired and I was trained, and the learning curve was really long. But what I eventually was able to do and still do for a living is index books, which we all remember from high school at the very least. In the back of those big history books, there's an index, and you can look up, Civil War, and then it tells you all the pages that the Civil War is on in the book. So I write those for a living, and it's tedious, interesting, boring. It's like everything at once. And I have no say over what books I do. The most famous book I ever did was a biography of Hunter S. Thompson that ended up being featured in the New York Times and all over like bestsellers. My name is not credited ever in the books. So it's interesting because I'm on bookshelves everywhere, but you'll not see my name. But I do find it hilarious. And, so I've done some other interesting books, but I do a lot of textbooks and a lot of projects for arts and coffee table books and stuff like that. So
that is very cool. And actually, as you were describing it when we were talking earlier, I was thinking I've done that too. I've put together my own indexes that had to be reorganized, even if the original author for the works I edit had an index there. I've had to go back through and put all the links onto the new pages, and wow, it's a lot of work, but it fits my legit autism because I just focused down on that. I was like, I got 7 things. I got to find them on these. I do a word search in the PDF file to find show me all the instances of Civil War. Bing, 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 bing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Make sure I got 7 here. Check that off the list. There's something very satisfying about that whole experience.
You're not wrong. And the only difference is I have to follow Chicago style rules sometimes, so it can get tedious within the tedium, if that makes any sense.
Gotcha. No, I'm making it up as I go along. So I have no idea. Yeah. Is it war/civil or war, civil, or is it Civil War as one, right?
Yeah.
Hell if I know.
And would be, and it's crazy. And then the other things I do is, I'm a writer. I have written 6 fiction novels. I'm working on my 7th, and the 5th one is actually in the process of publication right now. I'm working with a small publishing house, and I'm really excited about that. So that'll be coming out next year. But my other books are available on Amazon, and I'm also a podcaster. And again, people can find this at my website. So MikeyOpp.com. It's short for Mike Oppenheim and Mikey Opp.
Yeah, and I'll put the full spelling of your first and last name and the link to your website in the description of the video, so you guys can you can even pause me right now and go check it out, or open it in another window while you're listening in the background. Check out his work. So I think we're ready to do the thing. Basically, as per my usual process, I'm going to shut up and I'm going to listen. Our friend Mike's going to tell us his dream in brief, whatever we can remember, and we're going to see if we can make sense of it together. So I'm ready when you are.
Okay. So this dream was in 2017. I want to say November, and the dream was so haunting, even though I knew it was a dream the second I woke up, that I had to call my brother and talk it out with him, because the dream was about his children. And so at the time, I'm going to use pseudonyms for his family.
Sure.
But obviously it's in a dream, so none of the cast was actually real people in real life. But anyway, so my brother's not in the dream, nor is his awesome wife, the mother of their 2 children. But he has 2 daughters, and at the time, one was 3 and the other was 6. And I was in New York City, which is where they used to live, and we were at the pretty famous museum that's like the former Expo Center and stuff. I don't actually know the name because I'm not a New Yorker, but it's pretty famous, and it's there's like a huge museum in it, and there's a big park outside. And so in the dream, we were like hanging out, just me and the two daughters, in like this big plaza. And then one of the daughters, the little one who's like 3, she just bolts and starts running in one direction. And so I tell the other girl, we got to go get her. And then she laughs and starts running in a different direction. So I had to choose which of my brother's 2 daughters that I'm in charge of to run after. So I chose the younger one because she's less lingual and the risk would be higher of injury and all that. But what's weird, because it's a dream, is that, of course, the second I start running after her, now I'm in a forest. And it's not like a prehistoric forest. It's not like an impressive forest. It's just a forest. And I'm just screaming and calling out for her, and I can't find her. And then I hear what I think is her, so I turn and start running. And then I find the other daughter, the older one, and she's okay. And I'm like, I can't believe you were running. I'm not yelling at her, but I'm like a terrified uncle. And so then we start looking for the little sister, and we can't find her, and we're looking everywhere. And then this is the part that was just like traumatizing to the point that I still remember it well today. We found her and she was dead. She'd been murdered, and
Wow.
Somehow in the space of like 5 minutes in dream time versus in real time, or you know what I'm trying to say. Like in the dream, it's not clear to me how long I was chasing her. It's not like realistic that way.
Yeah.
But it would not make sense in a movie to have the character die the way she did, and but it was basically like a serial killer had found her and killed her. It was not like a perverted crime. It wasn't any, like, there was no like moralism to like that. It was just more of the brutality that she had died. And then I just instantly woke up and I felt like guilt. Am I supposed to tell you my feelings? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah. Anything connected to it's wonderful.
Okay. Yeah. So I felt guilt. I felt frustration. I felt more than anything just tragic sorrow. Like I was heaving and crying, and I like couldn't handle the stress and the sadness of it all, and it was just strange. And like I have this phrase I use for like when I want to check in, is what I call it. I check in with like spirituality, whatever you want to call it. I don't like to use the word God, like source, something like that. And
Sure.
I check in. It's my intuition. And so I checked in, and it was like, this is just a dream. It's not like this is going to happen in the future. So that was like the only thing I got like that relieved me. And then I called my brother, and I was like, look, I have to tell you this dream. And so I told him, and he was like, that's pretty heavy. Don't worry, they're fine. And I think that was the main point, was I just like, I need to know that in real life, both daughters are okay right now.
Yeah. Please tell me this was just a dream. I know it, but to pinch me, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
for sure.
So.
No, wow. No, that's a very intense experience. I can imagine that. And I've said this before too, is that important dreams tend to self-select for importance by staying with you vividly and emotionally, viscerally. This feeling the feeling of importance is, I swear I dreamed last night and the night before. Couldn't tell you what they were about. I know I dreamed. I have memory that a dream happened. Couldn't tell you the details. Just can't. And it's been a long time since anything stuck with me. I'm still trying to figure that out. Maybe that's one reason I'm so fascinated with dreams. But there have been a few, maybe 4 or 5 throughout my life, that I woke up remembering every detail, and they were very important. One of them was relationship oriented. Another one about relationship oriented, also about my parents or family in general. So those are very common as well. Family focused dreams, especially fears of something bad happening to family. Very, very good content. So just to get it straight in my own head, if this was 2017, that was their accurate ages at the time, or?
Yeah, exactly. They were the accurate age at the time.
So now there may be like 7 and 10.
I think they're
something
9
like
and 5.
Not 5.
And it might have been 2018. Yeah.
No,
I might be
fine.
off by yeah. So.
No, just kind of putting it there. Right off the top of my head, do you have kids now?
Yeah, I have. Right now, I have a 3-month-old daughter who was just born, and then I have a son who is just turned 6 the other day, and so he's the same age. He's 4 months younger than the youngest daughter.
Okay, that is where my head went with that too. Is this maybe related to your own family more directly, but
Well,
using near relatives close as a proxy for some concerns. But I don't want to get ahead of the actual imagery. And this is where this is how my process kicks in, is like, okay, what is that? What is it? What do these symbols mean? Yeah, broadly speaking. But we're gonna get to that, of course. So, you said at the very beginning. So this is where we go. Phase 2, I call it. We go with the deep dive. We try and see it a little more clearly in my head. I got the story, but I want to visualize it a little bit better. So you're in New York and this is did your brother live in New York? Is that?
Yeah, my brother lives in at the time they lived in New York City. They just recently moved to the suburbs, but they were living in Queens, and on a previous visit I had gone with him and these daughters to this place, but that wasn't really featured in the dream because the place we went to was like the actual museum in the expo center, whereas this took place outside where like people just kind of hang out.
Okay. And if you give me maybe just a brief visual imagery of the landscape. I mean, there's I see long set of stairs leading up to a giant building. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, that works, except I'm more like looking out from the opposite direction of it. And so what I see is just kind of like vague grass parkland, like outside of this giant square, and it's really giant. Again, people who are familiar with the Expo Center in New York are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's like, people go there to like exercise and hang out. Like it's like a weird like social center almost.
And did you see any other people?
Good question. No, not that I remember. I mean, yes, there were like vague people out in the park, but no one I recognized. It wasn't like that.
So you did have the impression that the space was not completely empty. It wasn't you, the two girls, and nobody.
No. It was
generally
like me,
lightly populated or normally populated for that type of place.
It didn't get weird. Like I didn't know I was dreaming, or at least retrospectively, because it's hard for me to explain. I'm not a lucid dreamer, but I'm also like highly aware that I'm dreaming when I'm dreaming. I don't really know how to explain it, but I have an ability to be terrified and still very much in the dream, and yet vaguely aware that this is a dream. But I take dreams very seriously. Like my favorite quote from years ago is like, how do you know that this isn't the dream and that the dream is real? The dream state. That's kind of how I explain. Yeah.
How do I know I'm not a man dreaming I'm a butterfly, or vice versa?
Yeah.
There is no. That's one of those questions. Like there is no answer, but there is no way to know, and that's why it's. But that's the purpose actually of those Zen koan type things is not to give a logical answer, but to have a moment of your brain goes, and you're like, I'm experiencing absolute confusion that makes perfect sense. Whoa. That's I love that. I love those things. So did anything let me start that over again. Were you standing next to any identifiable structures, like at the foot of the stairs or near any other visual objects in front of you? Was there a fountain? Were there any people you noticed performing specific behavior? Someone jogging with a dog? With the kids?
I remember kids bicycling. I remember like kids racing on bikes. And I just really remember that like it went from like this safe space of like control and you can see, and like I could keep my tabs on both daughters. And for all I know, I don't think they were riding a bike, but now that I said the bicycle thing, it wouldn't be relevant to my interest. I mean, it's probably to you, but whether or not they were on a bike, it doesn't matter, because once we're in the forest scene, they're not on bikes for sure. They're just running. So
yeah, and it was
your
original impression that they took off, and it may not matter whether it was on a bike or not, but but so usually there's triggers, there's connected ideas that cause another one. Like I say something to you and you go and you have something to say in response. So in the brain, we're doing this kind of monologue with ourselves where we present ourselves an idea, and the completion of that discrete idea causes the next imagery or behavior in the dream. Happens very often. I can't say this is always consistent, but it's fairly consistent. So what I'm looking for a little bit is like what happened right before the first girl took off. Like, did you have any kind of interaction with them? Or did you?
No, I was like more like the the guardian just watching kids play,
Okay.
Yeah. And it's worth noting that in real life, the younger daughter already had a reputation with me, at least, of being the kind of person who would just run off and, you'd have to chase her down. So
that was me as a kid too. My poor parents. No,
yeah.
I remember, God, I was like 5 years old. We were at the Hoover Dam. My dad wanted, my dad's an engineer. I mentioned that earlier. Engineering school related to that. And he's like, we're going to take my son and show him the Hoover Dam, one of the greatest engineering accomplishments of mankind at the time. And of course, me being 5 years old, I thought it was hilarious to just run away when they're calling me over the roar of the water. And they're like, he's going to throw himself over the edge, the idiot. And as I looked back and laughed while they're chasing me, thinking it's a big joke, I turn around and right into a rock in my face, like one of the rocks lining the road so you didn't drive into the dam and go off the edge, right into one of those rocks. Not the first time I hit my head. That's probably where my wizard powers came from, all the head injuries. Right? Every hero needs trauma to awaken the powers. I can't say that with a straight face. I'm so full of shit. But I think it's funny. So the experience you were having was surveying, and maybe the strongest imagery was of children playing and you observing them. And then the brain says, uh-oh, one of them decides to take off. And did she say or do anything?
No, she just starts taking off. And like the problem, as far as I remember in the dream, is that as soon as she takes off, my instinct is to take off after her, but I have to check and find the other daughter. I can't just leave her because she's not safe being unattended. And that's where all chaos breaks out,
Do you remember if you look in your mind and you see the 3-year-old suddenly start, now I'm doing this thing where like I'm imagining the 3-year-old's on your left and the 6-year-old's on your right. I don't know if that
fair enough. Yeah.
Roughly.
That's right.
So you look at the 3-year-old. Do you see her running towards anything, or do you see any obvious danger in front of her? She's heading for traffic.
No, she's running like away, and then like this is the part that doesn't make sense. Like now all of a sudden there's like a forest. Like it's not that she runs into a forest, it's that she runs away, and then like I look and find the other daughter, and then as soon as I look back,
bam, you're all in a forest.
Yeah,
those sudden scene changes are, I think that's very important. That's a connection point for the discrete ideas. It says, okay, look at this. You got that. Now look at this. And it can be a completely different setting. You're on the moon, it doesn't have to be logically connected. We ran to the edge of the park and there was a forest. No, you're just in the forest.
Yeah.
Do you remember her running on a path, taking off into the grass, heading for a tree line?
No, I don't remember that part. I do know once we were in the forest, there were paths, and I was following paths to try to find her, for sure. It wasn't like branches hitting my face and like, that kind of.
When you did the sudden look to the other girl, did she have any response? Was she watching?
Yeah, yes, she did. And it was like, she was amused. Like she thought it was funny that her little sister had run off again. Like from her perspective, everything's fine. She's safe. I'm safe.
Nothing bad's going to happen. We're just playing.
Nothing bad. Yeah. We're just playing.
Like yeah. And then she actually takes off running in the opposite direction.
Now that and we're retelling it, I think actually that she doesn't go running off. It's just more that the time it took to find her and grab her was too much time. And that's how the other girl had gotten away. Because then I think she and I just immediately are in the forest trying to find the little sister.
Okay.
But she's not like active or paranoid or anything. You know what I mean? Like she's with me when I like look and see her, but it's not, that's only important that like I'm not, hold on. Because I know the first time I told you this, I said I found her, and I do remember that as part of the dream. So maybe I don't remember her running away from me.
But there maybe it was more the idea that you had that moment, and you did describe it this way of having to make a decision suddenly.
Yeah.
If I'm going to save that one, I have to pick one to stay with. And this one's older. She'll probably be okay. The toddler's going to fall in an open sewer grate. I mean, she's just dumb. Yeah. She's a 3-year-old, doesn't know anything. So you had to make that. There was a parsing of decisions of responsibility and that's why I immediately went to the idea of maybe your own family too, is like trying to parse responsibilities in connection with that. That's one thing I would put like a carrot in, and we come back around to it.
Yeah. Well, and I think just because you're gonna get back into it, this dream does follow like divorce and a lot of like issues with custody and my son and stuff. So there's definitely, a strong connection. But this is what I want your help. I don't understand the connection. I could make up a reason, but
Sure. That is an important detail, that it was very recent to these events, and that is exactly where your mind would be, is trying to parse these responsibilities to yourself, your career, livelihood, and self-sustaining, but also family, wife, son, all these different things together. But then why? What is it trying to tell you? So without that piece, we got to get that piece in there. It's really going to give us that context to kind of figure out what the rest of it is. So there was it was the act of the smaller, more vulnerable one running away, separating themselves from you voluntarily or under compulsion, perhaps. Who knows why 3-year-olds do anything, right? That made you assess your responsibilities in a way, and then suddenly decide, I gotta go. And then that action, that choice to take action, a protective action, to move your responsibility towards taking care of the younger one, puts you in a forest. And when you realize you're in a forest, you say there's paths. Where do you first appear in the forest? What's that setting like? I mean, there's,
very green, very, very green, very like lush, but like I said, not like a jungle. It's definitely like an North American forest. I would say it matches the forests of, I've lived all over America, like anything you find in like Pennsylvania, upstate New York, that kind of region. So like, so in other words, I grew up on the West Coast. Like, it's not redwood trees. It's just like basic stereotypical forest, like Blair Witch Project, kind of like,
Gotcha. They tend to be a little smaller trees for
smaller trees.
Yeah, because I'm in Oregon. We go just a few miles out. We got trees that are like, I can't put my arms around them.
Yeah, not like that at all.
Yeah, they seem to grow smaller in general in the Northeast. So
so definitely if I had to, but it was very green. That's the part I just remember, is like it was a bright green forest, very like clean. There wasn't like wildlife, and then the trails were like carved in brown, and that actually would remind me more of like the West Coast style, like Muir Woods in the Bay Area where I grew up, or even just like a hiking trail up in Oregon. Like, it was definitely like a worn path with like that kind of clay looking like dirt. It wasn't dry. The forest was not dry. That's the part that's weird, is like these stereotypical East Coast forests that I'm describing are kind of dry looking, whereas West Coast is so it's almost like a blend between the two.
Yeah, for sure. We get a lot more underbrush, undergrowth, and it's a lot more damp. We just rains constantly around here. It was just raining earlier today, and then it stopped for a minute. It will rain again. I'm in Portland, Oregon. So
okay, cool.
At least it's not on fire. We didn't, like last year when I started all this stuff, I had the vocal fry from all the forest fires blowing in the window, and I had to have the windows open because it was 90 degrees in here. So I did the best I could with those episodes. They were crap anyway. I mean, I didn't have my process down, and the audio recording was terrible. Don't listen to the first 4 or 5 episodes. go listen to them. Make fun of me. That's fine. They're fascinating too. It's a horrible audio quality. Nothing I can do about it now. Long story short, back to your dream. So that's what you noticed about the quality of the living greenery around you and the paths. How many paths would you say they were, and did they all radiate out from you, or you discovered more paths as you went down one path initially?
More paths as I went down, and also I think I did like hop off the path to cut to other paths and stuff. Because again, this part of the dream is like insane, like heart racing, just running, so it like both lasted forever and went by in a flash.
Yeah, and if we could dwell in that in a moment, if you could do, and it's really hard. That's why I do a lot of talking, unfortunately, is to try and help people tease out some of these little details. So there was this kind of a chaotic-ish frenzy to gotta find this girl, gotta go do it. But there was an experience you had during that time, even if it felt very brief. I mean, obviously you're feeling rushed or panicked. How would you describe your search?
Yeah.
You know?
Panic, but like in real life and in this dream, I'm very cool when I don't panic. I'm very cool under pressure. Like I've been in a few situations where like people were starting to like riot and like, just very dangerous situations. And I actually tend to like calm down in those situations. I'm a good like leader in catastrophes. I've been in a couple fires, things like that. So it's I'm not like bragging or saying anything like unrealistic. It's just more that I don't panic, but I'm still panicked, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm of course like
keyed up with the
but my
fight or flight
brain
or
is
whatever.
very clear. Yeah, but I'm very clear in my head, which is just like, you must find both daughters, and like you need to find the younger one first, which, like I said, is not what happened.
Yeah. And did you, at any point in this search, notice that the 6-year-old wasn't with you, the older one?
Yeah, well, this is the one part that, like, because the end of the dream features the 6-year-old heavily, but only the beginning and the end. So this part is what's weird to me, is like my memory of the dream is a construct, and then when I close my eyes and try to like be in the dream, I think that's the more true version. I don't know if this helps. So when I do that, she's not with me. It's just like, but I'm not panicked about her. Like I kind of like intuitively or otherwise just kind of know, like, of course she's going to be okay. I got to find the little one. Yeah.
And
but at the beginning of the dream, it was terrifying because it wasn't true. I couldn't just leave the 6-year-old in a crowded public space.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point too. And it will come around to this. That's what I was talking about, that assessment of responsibility. It's like, what do you do when you have two seemingly equal responsibilities and you can only pursue one, literally run after? You have to make a value judgment. It's like, you can't stand there and do nothing, because that's a choice in and of itself, which is basically just defaulting to one side of the equation. So your brain's giving you these representations of, imagine you're having this dilemma. You've got this problem you're trying to face, and here it is. Now you're in the forest trying to solve it. And forests are a powerful metaphor too for, I don't know if you're a fan of, speaking of New York, stage performance stuff. Have you ever seen the play Into the Woods? Does that sound familiar?
No, it's so famous.
Into the Woods. I'm not going to sing it, but anyone who hasn't seen it, the 90s version I saw on public broadcasting, original stage production, beautiful. Bernadette Peters, a couple other famous people you recognize doing their turn on stage. Long story short, I go off on tangents. That's why these episodes end up 3.5 hours. Sorry, we're gonna keep it tight today. In going into the woods is a metaphor for transformational change or braving danger. It's very, very hero's journey type of stuff too. But it's also the place where things are not orderly like civilization. You've got nice streets on a grid, and they're all named and numbered, and you know where you're going. You go into the woods. There's trees everywhere. There's no path. It's dark. It's cold. There's animals. I mean, it's a huge psychological impact of going into the woods with as confronting a problem, basically, which is what you're doing in the dream. Very interesting. It takes you there. And there's other metaphors, choppy seas or deep caverns where there's, danger and darkness. Lots of great metaphors there too. So that's why I'm trying to take this seemingly fuzzy, and I'm sure it is, but also, so just to put myself back in it too, you appear there, you assess the surroundings, just instantly, this is what you see, is what you know is happening, and you take off down a trail in determined haste, not a panic, but you got something to do, it's important, and I'm not messing around here, I'm going to get it done. So do you remember looking anywhere specific? Like you check under a rock, there's a log, there's a waterfall,
no,
none of that kind of...
I'm more listening. I'm more like trying to listen for the sounds of a little girl. That's what I remember. I remember like running, stopping, listening, running, stopping, listening, calling. I'm not going to say her name because I said I wouldn't. So
yes, no, that's
Baba.
So calling out to her, and mostly that is actually what I was looking for, is what was your method of searching it? And so it could have been visual, it could have been I'm looking in all these different places, but for you it seems more focused on sound and receiving sound back. So I put another carrot on that, the idea of communication, the idea of connecting with someone verbally, perhaps, or through listening to them. And that can be a metaphor for things, or it could be literal. It could be like, I need to listen more, I need to use that skill better if I've been using it, or take something I heard and incorporate it into what I'm trying to achieve or accomplish. So there's something powerful in the idea of call and response.
If I had a bell to hit when you say something that resonates deeply with me, that would be very, very deep on the bell. The idea that because at the time I wasn't listening well in general, and wow, I wish you had been there in 2018 to do this.
Well, me too. I got chills. Yeah. I live for these moments when I say something and someone feels zing. It's like, I feel it here too. Like I don't know how many miles you are away. There was a moment when I saw it on your face too, and you're like, I just said something. I'm going to ask him what it was.
Yeah.
Well, we know the end of the dream, and I don't want to derail us completely, but I don't want to lose this feeling either. If you jump on that and you look at the dream, does things start to fall into place in a way? Maybe we got more work to do. Maybe you've made a connection that's going to just open a door to what's really going on.
Well, I think it doesn't solve everything for me, but it does. It's weird because I still don't associate the dream with like a failure to listen. But when you said like the dream is telling you to listen, it is, like, it obviously. And so at the time I wasn't. So I got divorced in the spring of 2017. I filed for divorce in late 2016, and the divorce was finalized in June of 2017, and my ex-wife and I had agreed to split custody, and she lives, I met her in America, we married in America, and she's a dual citizen of America and Thailand, but she's really Thai. And so she wanted to move back to Thailand, and I had basically said, no, like, you can't move with our son to Thailand. And so we argued vociferously, and then in October of 2017, she took a sanctioned trip with him to Thailand. And then she basically just didn't come back. She basically just said, not coming back, make me. And that led to the worst experience of my life. And very few things could ever happen again that would ruin my life as much as I thought this event would. Now, again, I'm smiling, I'm remarried, I have another kid, and all's well that ends well. And I can get into as much or as little of that as you want. But at the time of this dream, what's really important is that I was like listening to people who were saying they had my best interest in mind, but I didn't trust. And then I was also listening and not listening to people I trusted. I was getting I'll put it this way. One friend told me, hey, I got a friend who's ex-military. He can just murder the family and bring the kid back. And again, I'm saying this on YouTube and I'm saying this out loud. It's not.
This is an option you did not pursue.
It's not something that I solicited. I never in a million years would ever consider that. But I'm just trying to show you the extreme things I was forced to hear is probably a better word. I wasn't listening. And so, I have that. I have multiple lawyers trying to talk to advice, and I have my parents. I have, every friend. I have the lawyer from the divorce trial who isn't the lawyer international custody, and just, and when I review this whole, and again, this situation is somewhat resolved. Like, I ended up allowing him to stay in Thailand. I communicate with him constantly. He's my son. I love him. It's definitely not my ideal situation. But the point is, at the time of this dream, and this is why I wanted to analyze it, I knew this dream was supposed to help me, but I didn't. I couldn't figure it out. And so when we're stopping on this listening point, and I'm positive there's one, if not two more things you're going to get from this for me. I just intuitively feel.
We haven't even gone back to some of the other points. Yeah.
That's why, I'm just sure that but this point is so tragic to me, because that would be the lesson I would tell any person in the future. For every phase of dispute with someone you love or are married to or anything, as I would just say, no matter what, even when it's painful, listening and shutting up would have been the best action at every step. Like, every time I think, every time I thought, if I don't speak up, I'm not defending my son, I'm not defending myself. There's like a culture of like, it's apathy or it's pathetic to like listen. Even like we were talking briefly about like how I index books from like the somewhat extreme left and to the somewhat extreme right. So obviously not like, I'm not like Antifa's books or like, some white supremacy, but I do
Right.
like, right-wing authors who like sell on Fox News. And then I do like left-wing authors who sell on Slate, like I have definitely like that spectrum. And so that's kind of like my advice to general culture right now too, is like, don't be afraid to listen. It doesn't mean you agree and it doesn't mean you take into action, but don't be afraid to listen, because when you learn what is conflict to someone else and what is bothering them, you're going to make much better decisions. And so this dream, in my opinion, based on, and again, I'm giving you all the credit in the world, not something I would have been able to.
I just rattle doorknobs. I mean, you open them or you don't.
But I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
You hit it really hard, and so I think this part of the dream was really trying to tell me like, how to listen, because that is the one thing I have learned from this experience, and it's why I started a podcast, and it's why I do a lot of like selfishly selfless work, like projects to help other people. And it's because I just feel like that's the problem right now, is like we're not only are we lacking compassion, but the first step to compassion is just listening.
Yeah. For sure.
And so yeah,
and I often have a problem with that too. Like, well, like now I just started to talk over you. My turn. Let me tell you something.
Oh no, not at all.
But I mean, imagine me trying to do this without listening to the dreamer. I mean, that's really, this whole episode. Everything I do is an object lesson in exactly what you're talking about. Is first I gotta listen. You gotta tell me what we're talking about, and then I can say, well, maybe I got something to add to that, something useful, something. So there's a mirroring process going on in what I'm doing here, where there's a call and response as well, and we're both looking for an answer in the forest in this dream. That fits very well with what's going on too, because there's an urgency to resolve the potential danger to a child, and a child that's gone away from you, and we don't even know why the dream representation, the niece, younger one, left. Just your brain needed to say, okay, imagine you've got conflicting needs, and now you have a dilemma demanding action. And so you're in the forest using sound, using listening, calling out, trying to hear a response, trying to get a connection to resolve the problem. So if we go a little bit further down that, how you said that there was a sense that it took a lot of time and no time. I mean, there's just an indeterminate experience of time. But it wasn't, you turned around the first corner and there you found what you found.
No. And as a matter of fact, I'm like, God, it's so frustrating to have like two memory versions of this dream. So in one version, I find her dead body, and then in the other, like the authorities find it, and it's like later. But I feel more comfortable going with, like I said, this version when I close my eyes, which is I found her. So even if that's not true, but I do think it's very important that in both versions, a lot of time passes like that didn't actually pass in the dream. Meaning like there's definitely cut footage between like this long chase and the revelation that the younger daughter has died. And I don't think the older daughter, there's no way she was with me when I saw or learned that the younger one had died. So that was not a feature of the dream. Again, I don't think the older daughter is as, I think in the dream, it's like important that she's there, and it's important that my loyalty is split, but it's not important like that she experienced the chase or experienced the revelation. Like the older daughter isn't supposed to like learn from this or anything, but I do remember
definitely. I had that same impression too, is that it's sometimes we bring in a symbol or a representation to serve as an anchor for certain things, but then they're not very active in the dream. But and also that her relative insignificance dream wise is that she was there for a reason, but then when you're doing the other thing, she's not there because she's not needed. What she represents isn't a part of that portion. But then your mind at the end tells you, well, don't worry about her, she's fine, because you're not if it didn't connect that dot by the very end, then having her there in the beginning was irrelevant. If you just didn't care about her enough to remember her at the end, what was the point of having a dilemma? Was it actually a dilemma? So it makes sense that it would come back and you go, okay, and her, she's fine. Oh, dream over. And there may be something going on also with the authorities, because I don't mean what they represent necessarily, but the idea that there's a version in your head and something probably loose where, well, what do you do when you find someone has been hurt and you can't take care of it yourself? Eventually, so your brain would probably say, oh, and you called the cops and this resolved this way because that's what you do. So they may not have been, it may not be extremely relevant. That may be more, let me say, it could or could not be relevant depending on how important it felt. And it seems like on this one, it was an afterthought in that sense.
Yeah.
Like if it was a big production of the cops came out and you're getting questioned, that's a different, element. Yeah. No, but it's like, oh, and I called the cops and the 6-year-old's fine. And this is your brain puts the logic to it kind of at the end to kind of tie everything in a neat little bow and say, don't worry about those things. Focus on the other stuff. That's what it was really all about. So the moment of discovery, strong imagery around that in terms of place.
No, not at all.
Physical environment.
Actually, I think this is I should have said this earlier. I'm a writer and I'm a podcaster and I do all these, I play music, but I am not a visual person at all. I'm just not. Like if someone were to ask me to describe you, I would give 20 adjectives about your personality and then they'd be like, yeah, but what does he look like? And then I would be like more than vague, and it wouldn't be for any reason except that I just don't place a lot of importance on looks. And again, this isn't some like virtuistic quality. It's more like pathetic. It's just that I don't really lock into like visual images. So whether or not I saw her or not isn't even important to me in the dream, nor is it now. It's more that the revelation that she had been brutally murdered. Like, and again, this part was clear. It wasn't like rape. It wasn't like anything like, because she was a kid. It was just like she died and she's gone forever, and it wasn't even like, this is your fault. Like when I called my brother, it wasn't to apologize. It was to like lament and cry with him, like to grieve with my brother. And that's why I wanted to bring this dream up, is like, at the time it would have been very easy for me to be like, oh, you feel guilty about your son and he's going to, but that wasn't it. And that's why I talk to you. And that's why I'm so impressed already. It's just that, and by the way, for the audience, for people listening, it is still really helpful to learn this now. It is like incredibly helpful, because it's going to reinforce what I took away as the biggest takeaway from this whole experience, which is, like I said, to listen better and to just like not act. Like acting is actually pretty immature in my opinion now. Like I used to think actions speak louder than words, and but now I'm patience and listening is like the best action. So
sometimes, yeah. No, I waffle back and forth between, I gotta do something about this because it's a problem and nothing's gonna happen until I do something. I gotta fix it. And then the other half of me is like, yeah, but what if you do nothing and it just goes away? And I'm like, sometimes doing nothing is the better option. And it wars with me of like, am I just being lazy? Am I just like, oh, I'm going to ignore it and hope things work out, or what is? And that's a judgment call in every conceivable situation. What is doing too much and what is not doing enough? Oh, yeah, we're going to struggle with that, but it's good that you're able to, as you said, draw additional confirmation of this lesson, and even sometimes crystallization of it. Like it puts it in a small, like sometimes I'll write a paragraph and someone will write a haiku and it's like, oh, the haiku is better, pithy, it says it all. And I do that with myself too. I used to be on Twitter more often than I am, trying to encapsulate ideas, and like if I can't get it in 240 something characters, I probably shouldn't say it, because I need to just, what am I talking about here? Because I can write essays too. But even that, can I get it into a sentence? Can I knock out a couple of words and just make it even tighter where people just bing, they get the idea, and I'm not going on for days like I am right now. But I think it is important that she wasn't just dead, she was killed. So there was some, and it is important that it's not a sense of guilt or responsibility. And I think that matches with the beginning of the dream as well, because she ran off. Kids do dumb things. They get themselves into trouble. You do the best you can. You did everything you could. You went looking for her immediately and did not stop until you found the bad thing happened. But it wasn't, and this is interesting too, it wasn't an accident. It was that her poor choice from ignorance perhaps led her into the arms of danger and a kind of active danger, a kind of, human danger. This was a person, another person that did something wrong that they shouldn't have done. I don't know if that conceptualizing it that way brings anything to mind. There's something in there. There
is. Yeah. And especially what clicked for me, what really like resonated was that a human did this. Mm-hmm. That's resonating deeply. Like the audacity of humans. So like out of ignorance, out of whatever it was, she runs off. Okay, that's exhibit A. But exhibit B is like, why would we be afraid of a child running off unless it's that a car accidentally hits her, or like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, an accidental death from a child running off is like something I can live with. But the idea that one of the threats is that people kill people for no good reason. And I think that's why the fact that it wasn't like sexualized or like, some form of like pedophilia is very important to me in the dream and outside of the dream, is that it wasn't like a moralistic tale of like the dangers of that at all. It was like just the cruelty.
Yeah, and that's a very so in the broad rubric of all the reasons a human would be a predator on other humans, that child targeted crime is one kind of thing, but we're actually not looking at that. It is identified as something else. It was a human predation, but it was a more general crime of opportunity type of thing. Oh, there's an easy victim because alone. There's something in there too that so there's this thread of, what am I trying to say? The idea of the kind of mistake a truly ignorant child would make, leading to their own death at the hands of someone, of an opportunistic predator. There's something in that theme. I don't know if we're going to get it necessarily, but so what does that relate to? If the whole thing was kind of about this communication process and the worries about your being separated from your son, and if it was good for him, or if you're fighting for your own pride in some ways, that's a struggle too. Would he be better off if I let him go, or would he really do I need to protect him and keep him here because that's what's best for him? That war is probably going on in your own mind. Were you getting any more zings?
Well, that was very accurate, and very, to this day, it's still the burning question. So like I said, I mean, I made the choice, and I did not make the choice quickly, and I did not make the choice well. Like, in other words, like, many things had to happen that were bad before I finally gave up and gave in to whether or not it's true, the idea that he will be okay there. Better off, jury is still out. Jury will always be out.
That's
They'll probably
true.
At different ages argue both, and so will his mother, and so will I. But the point is that you're making, and that the dream, and again, I want to preface this with, I love what you do. I love your show. And the reason I wanted to come on is that I think if we spent more time paying attention to dreams, we'd have a lot less conflict in real life. I think
this is one thing that unites us all, really. Every human on Earth, even me, I dream, don't remember it, but I dream. Our brain never stops. And if we could, get together on this kind of stuff, our common interests, even during the 80s with the Cold War with Russia, they loved to rock and roll with our blue jeans. We can get down with that. That's fine. That's something not to fight about. I feel like I cut you off again. I'm sorry.
No, you didn't cut me off, but I do I do think that this dream was both forward telling and backward telling, which is very interesting to me. And I think that that's why it's still worth investigating it now. Is like, I think that this dream was trying to help me see the decision, how I wrestle with the decision, not the decision, which is again why I think you're very, very good at what you do, which is like, you're getting me to see now this like nuance that's not a nuance. It's actually very important. So I would say we've gotten 2 of the 3. I told you, I have an intuitive feeling based on when that first one popped, that there's 3 things I'm supposed to get. So the second thing I think is that there's something about how we wrestle with decision making, and wrestling isn't healthy with decision making. And so the fact that a human did this and this was an outcome, and that I was in real life worried about like the pride that you said, that's a huge part of what went wrong in all of this, is like the ego and the pride and the fact that like you can't do this to me and you don't get to decide things for me and you don't get to decide things for our son, you know. And like,
I still struggle with that myself too. Am I just being an egotistical dick, or am I actually like holding a line because it's moral and it needs to be held? Hell if I know. Sometimes.
No,
so
exactly.
and there may also be a connection there too with the idea of if your brain split on a decision, and do I let him go or do I not? What's best for him? You could also be fearing, what if I let him go and something bad happens to him far away from me where I couldn't help him? What if another person hurts him? Like, could have been. So you've got these once removed near kin representations of family dilemma, and it's showing you two kids. Where was I going with that? Because of that reason, because it's the nearest, closest emotional representation that's one step removed. So you can just kind of look at the images and not the obsession over the specific people, which, that I think that's very often helpful in solving problems in general. Is like, okay, I have this problem, but I'm too close to it. What's another problem that's similar, and how would I handle that if I were not involved? What advice would I give to someone else in this same situation? And then like, well, if that's what I would tell them, maybe that's what I should do. Sometimes I do that to myself too. Like, let's take me out of the equation and see if it makes any difference. And that's really tough too, because we all have our emotions and our desired outcomes. It's like, even if it's 50-50, would your son be better off? Then you can also kind of put yourself back in there and say, well, would I be better off if you were with me? Can I tip the scale that way? Because I also want that. If it's really that close, maybe that makes a difference. But then you got the mom involved, and you got, and you're getting all this noise from well-meaning people that want to be helpful. They're trying to give you answers. They see you suffering, they care, or they have an obligation, being a lawyer or whatnot, to try and help solve the problem. And then you got to make those decisions. Okay, now it's up to me to choose from among all these options. Do I do nothing, let it go, or do I have the hired merc do a clandestine mission? That's a broad range of how can I respond to this situation. Yeah. Going back to maybe some of the other points, see if there's any more we can kind of squeeze out of the stone here. The many forest paths, and the idea that at some point you jump off the path, is, I think you mentioned, and so it's like there was. Do you remember that moment of choosing to jump off the path, and that something caused it, an intuition, I need to go this way, or the path looked like it was going to dead end, and so I need to just make a different decision?
Well, the part that I glossed over it, and I feel terrible for people watching at home, because I feel like I'm someone who like went on trial and like gave testimony, and then they're like, no, I didn't mean to say that. I said something.
That's why we do the deep dive. We go back and we see more that was there that we didn't know. Yeah.
The closed eyes version of the dream, which I'm again saying is the real one.
Mm-hmm.
I just trust that this is it. In that one, it's not so much that I remember making the choices to jump off the path, but was very weird is that I found the older girl when I was really looking for the younger girl. And I think that's really important now that you're getting me to like pay attention to these details. That's a detail I never like really considered, is that like the irony of not seeking the one, and then also the relief I felt upon finding the older one, because at least one is safe, because once they both were gone, and that's why I'm saying I am testimony, is the younger girl was not following me through the forest to find the older one.
Yeah.
She was after I found her, but not for the first part of the intense dream.
But there was a moment of also finding her, and that's interesting too. So on your path to pursuing one of two possible choices, you found that the other possible choice hadn't escaped you either, hadn't left you. Not escape's not the right word, but you discovered that it was also there on that same path. So that there's something about that came with you, and it wasn't that she was an active participant in the dream. It wasn't that other represented choice informed your decision, pointed out another path that you missed. That would be a different type of experience. But the idea that in that process, your brain says, don't worry about it. If you go down this path, this other choice is still available to you. Maybe there's something in that. Is that resonating with anything? I don't know if I'm saying it very clearly.
It is. No, it totally is. And I actually want to definitively state for the record that the end of the dream is not that I find the younger girl or that the other girl. No, it's definitely that we give up and then the police tell us later we found the body. She's been murdered. And,
okay. That would be maybe one of the reasons where you don't have a very clear visual image of finding her. As exactly. Much as you know, and that's interesting too, because there are definitely visual, auditory, learning styles. Tactile's a little less. Visual and auditory are the primary ones. I think visual a little more than auditory, but they occupy those two out of the three. Less people are, say, olfactory or gustatory learners. We don't often learn things by taste or smell. We're primarily visual and tactile and auditory. Actually, this is go ahead.
It's a hilarious segue to our previous conversation before we went on live, but I think it's worth mentioning. So I was a former teacher, like I mentioned, and I am a kinesthetic learner, which is tactile.
Yeah.
And I told you that there was a different dream I was considering telling you, and I'm not going to tell it right now, but that dream is entirely kinesthetic. And until this moment, I never knew that. And now I'm 1 inch closer to working out that dream at some point in my life. So
for sure. And one thing that I forget to tell people sometimes is that every episode they watch me do this is, I class this stuff as education. I mean, it could be entertainment, it's edutainment or infotainment, whatever you want to call it. But I would like to believe and hope that enough of these videos are out there and people can see what I do. So if they do what I do, write down your dream now, write it down again, fill in the gaps. You got your skeleton, then you get your rough draft, then you go back through and you start putting together, what's the story? What is this telling me? What does it relate to? You can do it on a split piece of paper. Maybe I'll publish a book someday where it's like the dream, interpreting dreams the wizard's way or something. It's not a bad title, but it's an awful title. I'm just kidding. But this is what I want people to be able to do is like, I hope someday to have more people want to talk to me than I can possibly interview. But everybody can do this for themselves, or at least maybe in partnership with a friend, or or you can do it with your therapist. I think anybody can follow this method. So hopefully you'll be able to take the dreams I couldn't talk to you about and apply the same basic method to it. It's hard maybe without someone to bounce ideas off of or give little connections, but hopefully people can do these connections too, and they can start looking at, how does this relate to my life? What am I struggling with? What's going on here? Is basically what an interpretation process is all about. And then the idea of a kinetic dream, I don't think I've heard of that before in terms of a primary experience. That is fascinating. We're only an hour in. If you got more time, we could brush over real quick. I just wanted to look at a couple more things on the, where did I put carrots in and why? You mentioned more of brown trails, like in Pacific Northwest, and then you mentioned like where I grew up. Mm-hmm. When you think of it that way, you're in this forest and you're seeing the paths as something familiar from childhood or teenage years. Where would you link that imagery to the time and place?
It's so weird because
another moment.
I'm getting like little tingles, but I wrote a novel shortly after this, and my favorite scene in the novel takes place in Muir Woods, and I remember being shocked that I remembered it or was obsessed with it. And so as a child, my parents are not nature people at all, and they don't like nature, and I love nature, and I was like the odd man out. So I ended up like discovering hiking and camping when I was in my teens and 20s. And so no, these paths are not from my childhood. They're from my 20s when I used to drive back. So I briefly mentioned I lived in Portland, Oregon for 4 years.
Yeah.
So I used to drive to Oakland, California, where I grew up, and back like all the time. It's a 12-hour drive. I just got used to it. And But on that drive, my favorite part is when you go through the old growth forest, and I would always stop and just like go outside and just like inhale.
Yeah.
So it's funny because, yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, the forest switched. It went from like an East Coast forest to like my childhood forest, and
Yeah,
which isn't
or
my
an
childhood
incorporation
forest.
of both, of like this more
Yeah.
of the look and feel of the trees, the canopy of the East Coast
Hmm.
forest, but with the foundation or floor or pathways from this particular time in your life when you're discovering nature, you're separating from home and dependence on family, finding your own way, finding your way through the woods, metaphorically, but in real life by going to the woods in real life. And it's interesting that that's the path your brain decided to show you in terms of here's what informs or guides or the setting from within which you conduct a lot of these analyses is maybe through lessons you learned at that time of your life. Something in there.
Well, and also I prior to this event, my not the divorce, but the actual like her going back to Thailand. So again, the divorce was actually like relatively trauma free. We got along well enough. It wasn't like a long thing. There was no trial. We just agreed, signed affidavits. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that that's why this was so traumatic to me, is that it was an act of betrayal and I never saw it coming. And yet a lot of people did see it coming. And
Mm,
those people were like vindicated in being right, but they also like on the side of like bad things happen. There's no way that like this will go well, and like,
yeah.
and so as a child, not only was I naive, but I was also like all the way until this event, which happened to me at 36, 37 actually.
Mm,
Um, I always believed in the best, and I always like believed that like even like villainous people deserve like a chance and blah blah blah. And I'm to this day like a huge hippie, and I love everyone and I want to love everyone.
yeah.
But this was a hard incident because it proved the other side has a point. And as much as
Yeah.
I'm anti-war, I understand that like when people with machine guns come into your village and you're anti-war, you get killed. And I don't think I
Yeah.
really grasped that until this event and the aftermath. And so now that we're talking about the dream and the paths and the connection to my 20s and stuff, I think that wow, yeah, okay, this really resonates. It's telling me that I went down different paths and there's nothing wrong or right about that, but like the paths you take lead you to the consequences. And so my path of hippiness and tolerance was also the path to a bad marriage and a divorce.
Yeah.
uh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And
Which
I mean,
isn't to say that it's wrong or right, which
yeah,
is,
no, that's what I was going to say too, is that it's almost like, it very well could have worked out just fine. And it just didn't. And that's a harsh reality too. But you could do everything right and things can just go to shit. And God, that's life, unfortunately. Yeah. And
yeah.
people, they say people change. Sometimes people don't change, but they make different choices than they would have because circumstances have changed. And that
And actually
maybe,
now that
yeah.
I'm sorry. Well,
No,
now that I'm
go ahead.
older, I find it fascinating to ask people as I get to know them well. So I don't ask strangers this, but I'm kind of curious. Like, when did that realization come to you? What you just said, like you literally phrased it perfectly, which is even if you make all the right decisions, bad things can still happen. Like it isn't correlative.
Yeah.
Good behavior, good ethics, good attitude does not equal all good
Good
outcomes. And I
outcomes.
think that
Yeah. I,
eh,
my memory's not great. Never has been. But if I were to give it a guess, I'd say pretty young. I mean, and by pretty young, I mean, barely getting towards teenage years. I mean, maybe even 10, 11, 12, something like that. I've
wow.
always been kind of a thinker. And now looking back, finally, within this past year, diagnosed with, Asperger's, autism. So, basically, while other people are looking each other in the eye and having conversations and interested in each other's lives, I'm like, where do rocks come from? Why is that rock there? And why is it that rock and not a different rock?
It's
And I'll just
interesting
stare at
because
the
my
rock.
friends, yeah,
Go ahead.
my friends on the spectrum, and I have many, they were the more realistic ones. They were the ones who were like, hey, you should consider this, blah, blah, blah. Like, are you sure it's okay for her to take a vacation? And
Yeah.
I was like, well, the lawyer assured me, blah, blah, blah. And I, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? And like, it was very interesting. So
There was a
I
moment
think there's some,
you had to give
yeah.
permission for her to take the vacation, and then she betrays that confidence, so to speak.
Well, it's a little more complicated. The lawyer
Yeah.
during the divorce, her lawyer said that she's not going to budge on this. If you're not willing to give vacations, she's not going to sign off. And then that would have led to a expensive, complicated. And then she said, worst case scenario, if you keep saying no, he can't leave the country, it's going to go before a judge. And then if she decides to say he's uncooperative, he's manipulative, and he's controlling, which are things that generally people argue in divorce courts,
Yeah.
it's going to look bad. She's like, you're going to like look like what she could paint. And right now she's not saying that. She's not painting that picture.
Yeah.
And she said, as a family attorney, that's what we fear when we're working for the man in a divorce, because
it's very rough on men.
Speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost, and I don't want to, and again, this is one of those, good, bad things happen to good people. You can be an honestly, just the greatest, most accommodating, supportive, wonderful, kind, generous person in the world. And a woman goes into court and says, he hit me, I'm scared of him. It doesn't have to be true. And I don't want to put that on anyone, and I'm certainly not putting it on all women, but you get into a courtroom and there's this dynamic that happens where the system run by, say, men want to be protective of an abused woman. And so she said it happened. We have no proof. They just have to they toss that coin and they say, we're just going to side with her just in case.
Yeah.
We're going to protect the woman because sometimes men do that. And that's, yeah.
Well, and in full disclosure, just because I'm an open person, I wasn't inconsiderate and not wanting to give her vacations. I wanted to wait until he was a little older. And her big point was like, absolutely not. It has to be in the first year and every year thereafter. And so that was like what we argued back and forth about for about 2 weeks. And so obviously now I understand why it was urgent to take this vacation. But had she done this when he was 3, 4, 5 instead of when he was 2, it probably would have gone down very differently in every possible way. And so I think that what you're saying is like really accurate, which is that I was put, again, stereotypes exist not for a reason, but they do exist. And so the stereotypes I was up against are stereotypes of men being controlling in a marriage and, how like divorce works. And the stereotypes that she was dealing with were other and uniquely hers. And so I just know that out of being someone who's conscientious from the Bay Area, I was raised in like a somewhat like subculture of America that is very feminist oriented. And so I wanted to go out of my way to be gregarious and kind in this divorce. And so it was like, it was not beyond me to grant her the vacation. It was just more that, and again, this goes back to listening. I was listening to two camps. I was listening to the camp of, oh, come on, just let him go. Are you kidding? No one does that. And then there was the camp of course she's going to do that. That's of course why they're asking. You know what I mean? And so this dream is like, and
you were faced with two equally disastrous outcomes, no matter what you chose. And that's because the path forks twice on each branch. One outcome of each branch is in your favor and the other is against you. So you're almost looking at an impossible choice in that sense. Do I fight this to the point where she gets tough and takes action that screws me over? Do I roll over too easy and then she gets away with murder, so to speak? Either way, seem like you're damned if you do. But in a way, you had to have hope and just say, I don't think that's the person I married. I don't think that's likely. That's probably where you were coming from on these circumstances of like, I think she cares about him too much to put him through that. And
the irony, in case he grows up and listens to this, I will say the irony is that she probably thought, I have to do this for him because I can't stay in America and be a good mother to him there. So there is a part of me that's compassionate. There is a part of me that has a heart and loves even with betrayal. And so I think, to go back to what you said, like consequences / turnouts, like there's a big difference in the words to me. Like consequences to me imply obvious effects lead to this consequence, whereas outcome is like a neutral word, like Schrodinger cat, like who perspective oriented. So how do you really know which is which? Like, so in this case, the outcome in the year 2021 is my son is happy, healthy, and lives in Thailand. He speaks English and Thai. I love him to death. I think about him every day, many times a day. I talk to him as often as I can. So it's not so bad, But meanwhile, the outcome for me, especially when I think of consequences, is terrifying. It's like, where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? Why don't I get to blah, blah, blah? So that's even to this day, it's like, yeah.
That's often where we get just the entire genre of human regrets. We often don't regret accidents. It's something happens to us. What is there to regret? I wish that didn't happen. Certainly, that's not regret. Regret is more like, I wish I had done something different. I wish I knew something. It's kind of this expectation of, I could have been different then. I could have been better than I was and handled that better than I did, made it, and the choice would have not turned out like it did. I don't like the outcome, so you start look back and blaming yourself as regrets, especially certainly for choices, and tough choices, no less. And I wanted to say too that, as you were mentioning, is that, like, we don't have to assume malice, as you were saying, to have her look at that and say that she's doing what she thinks is best. And even if it involved a little, smiling out of both sides of your mouth type of thing, just to get the result she was looking for, I would, that's why I would look at that. And I wouldn't say that you had done anything wrong, or that it would be necessarily something you'd not feel inclined, but be inclined to regret later on. Either way about it, because it looks like what you did is you weighed very, very difficult options, and the decision you made at the end of it was to act out of trust and love. And what you got is, he's not living in America, but he's doing okay, and you maintain that connection. So, there's a lot of things that could have worked out. She's gone. You never hear from him again because you fought it too hard, and she said, "I don't want to deal with this." And so there's a lot of ways it could have turned out horribly worse. And he's not dead to you, or you're not dead to him.
No,
in that sense.
Both. Yeah. But there was a point where that was certainly possible when I was arguing and not listening. And again, like, had you said what you just said to me in like 2018, I would have been like visibly shaking and being like, no, there was malice. What you just said is like, I would have paid a therapist all the money in the world to give me what I now have, which is the clarity to actually hear you say that and agree with you, which is that sometimes people do things that hurt other people, but it's not from malice.
Yeah, the object is not to hurt. Like, the outcome is to hurt.
Yeah.
It wasn't the intent, but it was the result,
But it was the result.
Unfortunately, yeah. And a lot of people do that for self-protective reasons. That's when you were talking about wanting to give people the benefit of the doubt. I would truly love to believe there is no real evil in the world. There's just broken people making bad decisions. And then I've seen some people that just seem to enjoy causing pain. And I'm like, I don't know if you can be that broken without having something deeper than psychology can fix, or medication, or whatever. There's just, yeah. Well, I've gotten into this before. I don't know who I was talking to about this, but the metaphors of the different types of movie monsters that keep coming back, vampires, werewolves, zombies, and why for centuries, going back to way old, vampire mythologies go back like 2,000 years or more. It reminds me of an anime that I saw recently, within the last couple of years, Shinsekai Yori, I think is what it's called. And it's translates to from the New World. So we go into this post-apocalyptic, but society has settled down into more agrarian, and without any spoilers, all kids are born with psychic powers. And this is like a new thing in human evolution after all these centuries have gone by. And there are two ways that the psychic powers can go wrong. People have kind of a schizophrenic reaction to them, and they become demons that warp reality and the reality of other people around them, or they get full of their own power and they become ogres and use their power violently to abuse other people to get what they want. And those types of persons are banished from this society. You can go live in the woods until your power destroys itself, but you can't stay here. So in Japanese mythology, you've got ogres and demons, and but then we look at, say, in the West, are more vampires, werewolves, and zombies. So zombies, mindless eaters that just consume without a thought for others. But vampires, which are more feeding on other people psychically, financial abuse or other things. And then the werewolf is more of the humanistic expression of our animal nature of when is this person going to flip, start barking at the moon and bite me. So we've got, I was going somewhere with all of that, but it related to what we were talking about.
I got it. Yeah, no. I was, yeah.
That's a fascinating story. I love that. I think I told that in the last episode too. So you all got to hear it again. Thank you. Thanks for listening. But it relates to what you were saying about human nature. Oh, the idea of evil is like, yeah, sometimes people do hurtful things to others because it's what's best for them. And it's not intended to hurt you, even if it does. Sorry, it's not you, it's me. I got to go. Well, that person, that relationship is hurt, but this person couldn't stay and be happy. So there's that, but no one's at fault necessarily. Then there's the other people who are like, I just like to see you hurt. Show me how much you can hurt. I'm going to stick around and make it worse. Oh, that's awful. So at least you're not dealing with that situation. That's malicious people. It's a whole nother story. And it doesn't seem like the dream was about that necessarily, more about the fear that your son could be exposed to some danger that you couldn't save him from because he's so far away. Seems like that was maybe the connection of the consequence.
Yeah.
Somewhere in
Which, there. Again, I didn't make that at the time. But this has been incredible. I knew there was a reason this dream stung, and I hung on to it because I've had prolific dreams, but they've never stayed in my memory bank the way this one did. And it was funny because when I was, I said I would come on your show because I was excited by your show, but then I didn't think for even a second, I have to have a dream to tell on the show. It was like the disconnect between those two was so severe that when I got serious about it, because we talked about doing it, and then I scheduled the actual date, and I told my wife, and I'm like, I'm really excited, I can't wait, blah blah blah. And then I was like, oh shoot, what dream am I gonna? And, and then this was the only one that came to mind. As far as, like I said, there were these other three that are reoccurring when I was younger, and they don't really, but they're not like this. And this one, you've really helped me see what it was trying to signal back then, but also just how helpful it is to go over this now, because these lessons can be reinforced, and you've helped make this so much stronger for me, so much stronger. It's really, I'm really impressed.
Well, I really appreciate that. I'm gonna stop your compliments right there, because I'm turning red and starting to sweat. That's don't no applause, just throw money. Sorry. Well,
I do want permission to quote you, though.
Oh, sure.
I'm a writer. You said something that I wrote down, which I love, which is, we don't regret accidents. And I think that's profound, and I don't think I've ever heard someone phrase it that way.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And as much as, and there's a thing it's tough with accidents. We do a self-analysis of, you don't want to blame the victim, but you do want to look at yourself and say, is there anything I did which put me at risk in a way that I didn't need to be for next time? So there's a pure accident category of T-boned at an intersection. You're just driving. There's nothing. What are you going to do? Not drive? You had to go somewhere. Driving's just normal life. Bad things happen. And you don't tend to regret that stuff as much as, I didn't need to be standing on that street corner in the middle of the night doing what I was doing, which was not a good thing anyway. Maybe in the future, I change who I am. I don't do that and don't put myself in the place where I get mugged. There is that analysis to it. The criminal's 100% responsible. Maybe you don't need to be on that street corner at 3 a.m. looking for whatever it was you were looking for. That choices in that regard. So that's a different thing. Those behavioral regrets of things we wish we'd done differently versus out of the blue, engine falls off an air crane, smashes into your house. You can't stop it. You can't plan for it. What are you going to do? Move? It's going to hit that house instead, So that's where I'm coming from with that. I over-explain everything.
No, that was good. And
but I appreciate
I was literally T-boned in an intersection on a bicycle in Portland, Oregon in 2008, and I almost died. Wow. And it's funny because prior to this experience, that's what I always told people was my most traumatic life event. And it, of course, pales, but it's
little
also
did you know,
what you're talking about. Yeah,
that's a great thing too.
No regret. Yeah,
and when you also were talking about going forward with these things, and a lot of these. This is why I love dreams too, and this is kind of what I do. Is I live in pattern recognition land. And when people say autism is their superpower, it really is mine. This is kind of what I do: is pattern recognition, putting pieces together. The world is abstract. It's very hard for me to conceptualize physical objects. Like, why is this a pen and not something else? Why is that a rock? I've been doing it all my life. But it's also a lot of the things that really feel important. We're we can tell it's a piece of a puzzle that fits in many puzzles. And those are often very important things. I can take a copy of that, leave it there. I'm just going to take a copy of that. I'm going to put it over here too, because it works here also. We find ways to repeat functional patterns those are usually the most profound things. You wrote down that little quote thing. If that helps one person someday down the road, because that's the piece of the puzzle they needed to succeed in a certain situation, my work here is done, you know. That's the idea anyway. I don't know that I had any other notes, unless there were things that stood out in your mind that you're like, you know,
No,
hey, one more thing. Yeah.
I feel processed and complete in a way that I was hoping, but not necessarily expecting, because, you know, easy going, and I try to not have too high expectations. But this is incredible. I'm thankful. I'm humbled, and I hope that people watching and listening get something out of this as well, because I think, you know, what you do is spot on.
I really appreciate that. And you know, I was mentioning beforehand that, you know, you said nervous. I'm like, oh, me too. And it's like, well, you can't do this wrong. You had a dream. You tell me what it is. I'm the guy that can screw it up and say, I have no idea. That only happened once. It was episode number 19. I actually titled it Going Nowhere, because the guy was stuck in a chair in the dream and I couldn't tell him what it meant. And we went nowhere with that experience. But I always go into these things going, I'm not going to have anything to say. I'm going to just, it gets in my head that way. But 9 times out of 10 or more, so far, I guess 56 times out of 57, I've gotten something useful. That's all I'm going for. If I can be of value to someone, I really appreciate it. Well, then I'll just kind of, I'll do the end of episode housekeeping. We'll hang out for two seconds afterward to just debrief. And where's my notes? I had more notes. I'm always missing notes. Here's what I can't do is remember anything ever. Where is that? There it is. Okay. So that's been another episode of Dreamscapes. We're going to thank our friend here, Mike Oppenheim, writer, podcaster, book indexer extraordinaire. And you can find his website, MikeyOpp, MikeyOpp.com, MikeyOpp.com. He's got novels and nonfiction works out there. And I'll just say about myself, please, hey, smash that like button, as the kids say. Like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteers to tell me their dreams. Buy a t-shirt, make a donation. 10 books of historical dream literature now, working on number 11. If anyone's noticed, brief aside, I've got new stuff popping up in the audiobooks channel. These are actually lectures given back in the 40s, 50s by this guy, Manly Palmer Hall. Very interesting kind of occultist mysticist talking about dreams. When those are all published, I'm going to go back and put them together into a compilation of transcripts. That'll be book 11, working on it right now. So that is the housekeeping. And I'll just say, hey, once again, Mike, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it too.
All right, and everybody out there, that's it. Thanks for listening.